regarding the digital sphere. A very important issue is that of social media. We have chosen to discuss the role of social media in Africa, and we will actually, together with the speakers, we will actually discuss this issue about whether or not social media are friend or foe of democracy. Today, together with us, we have Aora. Aora is Director Africa and a member of the Digital Communication Network African from Zimbabwe. We also have Admire, which is a multimedia journalist from Zimbabwe, and we will actually have, we were waiting for Haruna to connect. But as soon as we wait for Haruna, we will start our discussion, and I will pass the floor to Aora. I'm just speaking with the first names because I know them and I don't feel that I should actually build up walls between us. So Aora, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for accepting the invitation and be today with us.
Thank you so much. Good, I'll say good evening to some of you. For some of us, it's good afternoon. My name is Miss Aura. My name is Aura Kawanzarua, but all my friends call me Miss Aura. As Nikos very politely introduced me, yes, I'm the director at Africa is Digital, an organization in Zimbabwe that focuses on the fourth industrial revolution and its impact on African economies and communities. And I would like to take this time to also introduce Admire Kodita, maybe a little bit more in depth. His academic background is in communication, law, history, and English studies at tertiary. He also has a master's degree in strategic communication. His career in journalism has spanned over 20 years, writing as correspondent and columnist on issues ranging from business, agriculture, technology, culture to society and politics for most of Zimbabwe's top independent publications. He's also an international correspondent for international media houses, and he is a book editor and newspaper columnist with frequent radio appearances, focused mostly on cultural affairs, and an analyst. So he's also happens to be a board member of DCN Africa, as well as of the Congress of African Journalists and interim regional vice president for Southern Africa. And all of this sort of stemmed from him being a journalist and his journey. So Admire, welcome. Allow me to welcome you. And if you just don't mind saying a few words, just greet everybody and say hello.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for being so kind to allow me to be part of this, this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Admire. And then I'll just very briefly introduce Haruna, because I think he may join us while we've already gotten the discussion up and running, and I don't want to interrupt the flow of the discussion when he does join us. So I'm just going to give you a bit of background on who Haruna Kanabi is. He's practiced journalism for more than 25 years. He trained as a journalist with the Union of African Journalists in Egypt and the Thomson Foundation of the United Kingdom. He reported for the Shariat newsletter before becoming its editor. He also trained as a human rights writer, researcher, and advocate in the United States. He's passionate about media and journalist rights and has worked as a human rights researcher for both international and national organizations and institutions. He is from Uganda, by the way. He is a founder member of Freedom of Expression Hub, an organization that defends freedom of expression, including media rights, and was severally arrested because of his journalism work and spent 4 months in Luzira prison on charges of sedition and publication of false news. He was sentenced to 1 year imprisonment with an option of a fine, and instrumental in successfully challenging in the courts of law, the sedition and publication of false laws, which inhibited journalism practice in the country. And these sections were nullified by both the Constitutional and Supreme Court of Uganda. He continues to practice journalism through writing and commentary on current affairs, and is a regular panelist on a Radio Simba program called Face the Press. So that is Haruna Kanabi from Uganda, and Maya Kudita from Zimbabwe, and myself from Zimbabwe. And we're very excited to be having this discussion around social media and its impact on democracy. Is it a friend or a foe to democracy? And I don't know, Nikos, do you want to sort of kickstart us off maybe in what does this look like in the European context? I know we're represented both Africa and Europe, but I'd be keen to know, what does social media look like and its impact in the European context, or maybe specifically in the context of your country, whichever one you can speak to?
Yes, thank you, Aura. And I will actually speak from a European perspective, but also as a perspective, as what is currently happening in Greece, which is close to Africa as well. So social media, European Union has taken various initiatives in order to, let's say, set some rules around the use of social media, etc. One flagship initiative was about the GDPR initiative, about the protection of data. The second initiative that has taken is the one that is running in general with big tech companies in France, in order that they actually requested from Google, etc., to pay news organizations for their content. The other element and the discussion around social media has been actually taken an important element in the following terms. It has been a great discussion around disinformation in French elections of 2017, and then in disinformation around Brexit. In both cases have been highlighted the necessity to set up specific rules, especially regarding tackling disinformation, but also there have been a discussion about how to tackle radicalization and extremism over social media. So Europe actually had to deal with three major elements. One, it was about what are the rules that should be set in order for social media and big tech companies. The second one, it was about how to tackle disinformation spread through social media. And the third one, it was about social media and extremism. I will start from the last point. Social media have been used from ISIS in order to radicalize Muslim youth in Europe. It has been used actually, and it has been a great discussion around the issue regarding how actually to stop extremist organization using social media. And then it was, and then the other element, it was about disinformation. How do you tackle disinformation that flourishes through social media? But this question was interconnected with the level of trust that people use and place in a traditional media or professional media organization. Because in order to respond to this question about the role of social media, we have to include in the wider discussion the role of professional media as well. Because the decline of trust in traditional and professional media led to an increase in social media. This is highlighted in Greece, where most of the people in various research that we have realized through the university, but also the one that Reuters conduct, we have seen that most people turn into social media in order to get their news. This is a result of decline of trust. So then, and that will be my last point, then we have the issue of whether or not big social media companies have the right to edit, prohibit someone from using or posting content. This is a discussion that started now, and I think that in order to understand it, we have to understand that social media are not just digital means. They are, and they should be dealt on the same way as traditional media. Thank you very much, Laura.
Very enlightening, actually, and I see how closely it's almost like, as you're talking, I realize social media and democracy, you can't really even separate it into like a geographical problem. The issues are kind of the same across the board. Admire, I would really like to hear your perspective based off what Nico said. What do you think social media and democracy looks like right now in the African context?
Well, as I was thinking about this this topic, I was just looking at history and even trying to wrap my mind around the concept of democracy, which, in my understanding, is a system of government where sovereign power is vested in the people, or rather through the elected representatives. And of course, democracy has certain principles. For example, accountability and when we're speaking really about accountability, let me just focus on that particular principle. This is where I believe social media tends to gain prominence. And, the old English adage which says opinions are like horses, everyone is one, has kind of been supplanted by the one that says, opinions are like, social media handles. Everybody is one. So people get to air and back chat the powers that be. And so in a sense, that kind of helps to facilitate the concept of accountability, because democracy thrives when people have information, and without information, it's very difficult for there to be a conversation and even accountability and some kind of checks and balances on the way in which power is exercised by those whom the public or the society has vested it in. So as far as I am concerned, social media to that extent is very, very useful, but they are big buts in that reckoning, as we shall see as it proceeds. Yeah. For example, the news feeds, how they're personalizing information and the things that you kind of, and creating what academic writing in the International Journal of Human Rights, I think Cass Sustain says information cocoons. I would like to call it silos, where people with the same kind of mindset kind of gather and coalesce, and we see what has happened. For example, in Zimbabwe, we've got the Barakashis, people, the Bachinjas, that are just like cementing or entrenching the polarity of the political space. I think the same thing is obtaining in America as well. We saw how, the followers of Donald Trump, for example, they coalesced, and a lot of things, some bad things, tended to happen. But, if you're standing on the other side of the aisle, you could say it's a good thing because, for example, if we juxtapose that conversation with the one about the Arab Springs, you would say those people who were trying to march on the Capitol, they felt that they were being revolutionary in a sense, you know what I'm saying? So I guess in the end, it depends who is talking about democracy and who feels that they are being hard done by or they're being oppressed within a certain social political system that's obtaining. That's my contribution for now.
Who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed? Very interesting. Social media, I think from what I've gathered, allow me to make a quick summary from what I've heard from both you, Admire, and Nikos, and hopefully from Haruna soon when he joins us. I hear he is trying to join us at the moment. Social media really and truly is it amplifies the voice. But the problem now becomes, whose voice are we actually amplifying through social media? And I liked the point that you raised, Maya, around information cocoons. There's a common saying on Zimbabwean Twitter around Zimbabwean Twitter is not the whole of Zimbabwe. So people will start a movement or push a trend or push a hashtag on social media, but that's not necessarily reflective. If you go into the street, what you've pushed your hashtag on social media and you ask them about it on the street, no one really knows or cares. So I feel like social media allows us to give a voice to the voiceless, but then the issue around how, like what you've mentioned, Nikos, around how it's used extensively by groups like ISIS and other extremist groups to amplify their voice. So how do we control that? So that's sort of my immediate interpretation from what's been said. I've written down a lot, but I've only touched on a few because I don't want to take up too much space. I want everyone to have something to share and contribute, and also to leave enough space for people's questions towards the end. Nikos, where are you standing right now after hearing what Admire has shared?
Okay, I think that we have to discuss the role of social media, and I'm really interested what actually Admire have highlighted, especially the role of social media in Africa. I think that we have to leave behind what I considered an approach that does not apply anymore, dealing with social media as only tech apps. We have to understand that they are a new type of media organization. So this means that we will have to see whether or not, to my point of view, the same rules of journalist ethics should be applied into these organizations, Twitter, Facebook, etc. Secondly, then comes the emerging issue: who is the one that decides about it? That Admire have said it. I think that this means that there should be bind from journalistic ethics and code. This means that we have to overturn our traditional approach, dealing with them as only means of spreading out, let's say, information, and reach to them and deal with them as a news organization. Because at the very end, this is what they are. When Facebook, Twitter, or whatever other social media in various countries, it is used as a mainly source of news, we have to deal with them as news organizations. If they want to keep themselves or to retain themselves as distributor of news, then the whole perspective changes. But I don't think that they became distributor of news. What we have seen that happened, and it has been highlighted, and to the extent of my knowledge, what happened with Twitter, it is that they have been actually taking a more active role, deciding what is news and what is not news. So this is something that we have to have it in mind.
Admire, you look like you're burning. Before I say anything, please share your thoughts.
Yeah, well, I think what Nikos has just raised concerning what Twitter did, the jury is still out on that one. I think there's a conversation around who polices these monolithic and powerful, social media organizations. And I think I want to concur to some extent with what Tim Berners-Lee said in 2017, when he said, was the effect that the likes of Google and Facebook and their advertising systems are designed to grab attention, resulting in spreading misinformation potentially. And I think a case in point, the Facebook executives had to go through with regards to the election of 2016 in the US, where, there was an investigation by, I think, the Intelligence Committee around whether or not they had allowed, the alleged Russians to influence the result of the American election. So I think that in that reckoning, we need to look at how they can also be subject to those same standards that the journalism profession does have to subscribe to. Facebook, in their defense, they also admitted that they did not do as much as they could have to circumvent some of these things. And indeed, they've employed third-party fact checkers. But it's a very huge, it's a monster, and I don't think that they've got the capacity themselves to fully go through all the information that is potentially subversive to society, that does not subscribe to journalistic principles, and do a thorough job. So I think the jury is still out on that point.
Okay.
From where I stand, I think it would be interesting when governments now clamp down on those social media organizations and say, okay, who do you answer to? Because there was a real conversation around when President Trump was muted, was suspended from Twitter. Okay, how do we handle the power, the obvious overwhelming power of these data-driven organizations?
Okay, now I can respond. It's like a table of ping pong. Now we will do, but we have to have Aura in the conversation as well. Aura, what is your view and approach?
Oh, okay. So I'm going to share my approach very quickly, and there's also very interesting discussion happening in the chat, which I also want to share. But especially around the point of treating social media like traditional media, I think that's going to be really difficult, because already, like, let's think of a newsroom for an example, right? You've got your editor, and social media, basically, you now have over, I don't know, a couple hundred million journalists working under you. How do you police them without stifling them? Is there not then are we then not sort of creating an internet state media in that sense, if that makes, I don't know whether my analogy makes sense, but that was sort of my first thought when you said that. Like, I actually wrote it down. How do you do that in such a way that you don't stifle you don't take away the little freedoms that people have left? Because social media is sort of like an expression of, it's another avenue for freedom of expression. But then also, what are you expressing? So that's all I'm going to share on that. And I'm going to sort of double it up by sharing something that Wallace Gichunge has shared, saying, my take in democratic terms, social media is actually citizen media, where citizen journalism is practiced. It's the best democratic possession the citizen will ever have, should be guarded jealously. We need to empower the citizen to harness this democratic tool through social media literacy. Okay, so I think that's a very interesting point. I'm not sure who would like to jump on that one. I think he's right. I think it is a very fine line between trying to manage what's shared on social media, but without stifling someone who's finally had a tool. This is access to get my word out there. And I'll give an example to what's happening right now in Zimbabwe, in Chilonga. There's a corporate that needed extra land for grass farming, and to do that, Admire, you'll have to help me. You'll have to fact check me, but I know it was a couple thousand, tens of thousands of villagers who would be displaced. 12,000 villagers were going to be displaced because of this corporate move, which was supported by government. And this is like a very remote village. Like, I don't even think there's very good network in Chilonga. Like, I don't even know if there's a base station in that area. It's very remote. But this story is current. Like, right now we have people who are sitting in places that didn't even know there was a place called Chilonga that existed, discussing about the people in Chilonga and their plight. And it moved government to action, albeit the action didn't actually change much. They just changed the instrument that they used to, you know, support whether or not these people need to be displaced from their land. But it's such a powerful example of how someone who is voiceless is given a voice through social media. So I think it's going to be a tough one, Nikos. I'll throw that one back into your court. I think it's going to be very tough. Good luck.
Now I will build up on that case, which is magnificent. I will just raise the issue of what have happened in India with farmers demonstrating against President Morsi, and their voice have been heard due and thanks to social media, widespread and messaging apps. Exactly. Okay, we have some differences, but it is similar to what you just have mentioned about Zimbabwe, etc. So, if I may, let's say, wrap up the discussion. We have to understand the positive role that social media play. I think that this is a common ground to all of us. We all agree that it has given voice to powerless. It has given voice to people that they have been marginalized. Voice to people that in autocratic regimes, in Belarus, this is the case, for example. In Myanmar, this is the case. Otherwise, we would never heard from them. That's an important element. But this, let's say, positive, Wallace actually have highlighted. So, but with this positive wave, then comes another wave that we have actually to understand, firstly, who controls them. But then I take back the question and I say, what we need to do is actually apply to them journalistic standards and ethics. This is the way that they should do. And build upon it, and based on what actually Admire have argued, I will bring up a national example of Greece. Facebook is using as a third-party fact-checker Ελληνικά Hoaxes, very good fact-checking organization, etc. So by employing a national, let's say, fact-checking organization, they are actually doing a localization element instead of someone being in Washington or in Seattle or in Burundi or wherever to take a decision about whether or not this content should be allowed. So I think this is a positive movement. But I'm totally agreed that we need to have more transparency in this organization because they are not anymore, or they shouldn't be dealt as commercial organization. We have, and this is a common ground that we all, the three of us share, that they go beyond the typical business company. They actually is something between a public institution or a public organization. This is how they should be dealt. So this means that we need more transparency to be applied, but also because we're talking about global conglomerates, we will have to actually apply local, let's say, standards, or at the same time to bind them by specific rules. What is a specific, for me, this is what I suggest, what is a specific, let's say, standard code, journalistic code of ethics? Because this is under which they operate. If someone violates not only the policy of the company, because they shouldn't be dealt as companies. They are more than that. They are organizations, they're public entities in that sense. So, so this is my argument, and I have just now think that Jimmy have posted here also a comment. But this is, yes, this is what I think. So, Jimmy, with what you are mentioning, this is what I argued actually, that the topic, it's not problematic, it's not black and white. This is what we are arguing, that we have to, we have to take into account the whole picture, that it is the positive elements, but also the negative elements, okay? But if I may ask you a question based on that, what are the role that social media played in Africa in general? Do you think that we have seen similar cases of disinformation as in other regions or other continents? Was that the case, for example?
Admire, please take that one, yes.
Oh, okay. Let me just quickly deal with the positives of social media. Going back to the notion of democracy once again, we know that, you know, for people to self-govern or for democracy to thrive, people need information, and they need also to relay that information to their neighbors or to their friends or to each other. They also need to alert society to the challenges that are obtaining within that society. For example, service delivery challenges. Right now in Zimbabwe, giving Zimbabwe as an example, we had floods. The rain was just quite a lot, and the roads that were already struggling through years of neglect have all but been, you know, many of them have been rendered, you know, what is the term? We can't be used, you know, properly. Now, so what that simply means is that people need to communicate this information with one another and highlight some of these concerns within their communities to the powers that be, to the people whose job it is to, for example, mend the roads, build bridges. So from that point of view, in real time, government are able to understand the issues that people are seized with, the things that are preoccupying their minds. So in a sense, it helps even those that are governing to get a kind of a barometer, a sense of where the mood of the nation is. And one would argue, of course, when you're looking at Zimbabwe, that the urbanites, you know, most of the people in the urban areas are the ones that have access to internet because most of the rural areas are not electrified and therefore they can't access the internet. But so having said that, you see what that is done, because those people with power, they want to run away with it because they feel that criticism is detrimental to their terms of office. And I do not know how we can be able to change that notion that when people give you feedback in a communication encounter, they're necessarily wanting you to lose your power more than they want you to do things that can improve their quality of life. So that feedback is important, but sometimes because there's emotion involved where people are hurt, it does nicely to those people whose job it is to govern, and that creates you know, maybe accusations of fake news and you know, misinformation or disinformation. It's not always the case. Sometimes people have genuine cases where they really need to vent, they need to communicate their concerns, but they are forestalled by this talk of lack of patriotism and the lack of interest in nation building. So again, the conversation goes back to what is our conceptualization of democracy? Is democracy everyone agreeing and like democracy, social media, because it exposes us to alternative views that we did not to experience, you know, materials of information that we otherwise might not have been able to access. That's what social media does, and it helps us to understand that we've got shared experience as a community, and so that is very, very important for a democratic process for a democratic society to thrive.
Fantastic.
Of course, if I may add one thing, the conversation continues between what is fact and what is falsehood. And sometimes truth is now relative to the person, to the individual who's deciding. Because if, for example, you are like, in our instance, ZANU-PF, you've got a certain view of facts that is different from a person who's like MDC supporter, because you interpret events based on through the lenses of your own party position.
Mm-hmm. If I would like to make a question on that regarding the use. Aura has given us a very successful example of positive use of social media. Can you name your or a negative example of the use of social media? And the second question is, what about the messaging apps? Is it as popular as social media?
Okay, a negative use of social media. That question caught me off guard because I am sort of pro social media, as much as I don't particularly like it. But I feel like there's so many reputations that have been damaged through the spreading of false news. The names are numerous. I think everybody present knows of somebody whose reputation was damaged, or their perspectives in life, or whether it's in politics, social, etc., has been damaged by fake news spread through social media. I don't think it's hard to pick. There are more negatives than positives, especially when it's used by governments as a way of pushing an agenda and propaganda. I feel like there are countless examples. Your second question around, sorry, just bring me out. Your first might be my connection, but it was a little bit breaking up a little bit when you were asking the second part of your question.
The second one, it was regarding the messaging apps. Are they as popular as social media? And the third one, it is about social media literacy. Do you think that it is important to apply because your organization now is working with this issue as well?
Okay, so in terms of messaging, I feel like, yes, messaging naturally is, if not slightly even more powerful than social media at the moment, the messaging apps, particularly WhatsApp. Like, as much as over the years, I believe like since 2017, if I'm not mistaken, I know, like, for example, Twitter has overtaken Facebook in terms of popularity in Zimbabwe. It's now, I think, yeah, it's now first, and then Facebook is following. So Twitter has grown, but definitely the things like WhatsApp, and it's really because of bundles. We have a bundle system in Zimbabwe, and I think in most African countries, where you can buy internet specific to like specific apps. So I can buy internet that only works for me to be able to be on WhatsApp, and it only works for Facebook, only works for specific apps. So those bundles obviously will then drive what's used the most. And at the moment, like WhatsApp bundles are the cheapest as compared to trying to buy a Twitter bundle. You don't get as much data. So I think it's now down to the fact that, like, you know, actual like data, the cost of data impacts a lot how much social media is used. But I think that it's almost now balanced between social media apps and messaging platforms. I feel like you can, traditional SMS is still obviously the farthest reaching. We still use a lot of traditional SMS. I'm not talking about iMessage. I mean like an actual text that goes through the wires in the air. Like, yes, I feel like texting is still probably the largest, I don't want to say social media, but means of disseminating information through a non-traditional format. And then in terms of the third question, gosh, sorry, I'm terrible today. My memory is so terrible today. But in terms of the third question around social media literacy, well, you know, I feel like social media literacy, yes, it has its part to play, but at the end of the day, social media really is just a tool. So I feel like once we're looking at social media literacy, we can't just look at it on its own. We have to look at it around even just how people behave. It's like often when you see someone misbehaving on social media, it's behavioral issues. You know, it's not that they don't know how to use social media properly, they don't know how to tweet properly, or they don't know how to use hashtags. It's the way they choose to communicate. So I feel like you can't tackle social media literacy without first just covering the basics around communication and respect for other persons and respect for other persons' information. I'll give you an example of a discussion we had. It was a sort of a closed discussion following the death of a very affluent personality here in Zimbabwe. His name was Genius Kadungure. He was a millionaire. And he died in a very tragic accident. He had a beautiful, expensive car, high speed. It blew up. A Rolls Royce Wraith caught flames and blew up, hit a Honda Fit, and the Honda Fit came out just like with a bump in its bumper, basically. It wasn't even a write-off. And the day that he died, on social media, people immediately, there were videos and pictures of his half-naked dead body on the floor. There were videos and pictures, videos of he had two other women in the car screaming as they were burning alive, circulating without any, like, no one saw anything wrong with the fact that there's two people dying in the car right now, and they took out their phones and they took a video. So I feel like social media literacy right now, given the way the world is, it can't be just dealt with on its own. Like, it needs to be dealt with even from a psychological level, to dealing with people and their behaviors. And these are learned behaviors. We've become very desensitized. I think if there's one thing that social media has done, is it's desensitized a lot of people. You know, I can say maybe 40, 50 years ago, it was unheard of to even share a sex tape, for example, or, you know, to leak any sort of sensitive information of that nature. It was just unheard of. But we've become so desensitized by what the internet has done that it doesn't matter now what you share. So I feel like that's one thing we've looked at as an organization, that you can't attack social media literacy independently. It's behavioral. It's behavioral science. You have to attack it from a behavioral science perspective. Yeah.
Okay, admire, and then I would suggest to have into the discussion Wallace and Jimmy as well, because there is an ongoing discussion in the chat room, and I think that it would be helpful to bring on the floor or on the screen, to use another term. Admire, the floor is yours, or the screen is yours.
Okay, in terms of the negatives, one of our vice presidents just recently resigned from his post following an expose by an online media platform of his, entanglements with a number of women, and that put him in a negative light. And what was interesting for me was how, from the online platform to the messaging platform, the news of his salacious, alleged salacious activities kind of like snowballed, and people were even making memes of him after, you know, the whole scandal had been exposed. But he did denying everything, and he did mention that it was artificial intelligence, people cloned his voice and that kind of a thing. That's another conversation also, where, you know, sometimes on social media, people can produce material that appears to impugn the actual or actually true, and it can snowball on those messaging platforms or even on social media before the person has been given a right to reply, and careers and names are damaged. So whether or not he was actually involved in all those things, for me, the jury is out, but he maintained his innocence. And he maintains that it was artificial intelligence, it was people cloning his voice and that kind of thing. So that for me was an example of how social media sometimes has got the power to amplify things that are potentially injurious to a person's character without them having gone through an objective test to see whether or not it is actually true. The media house maintains that the information that they released was true, and they were willing to go the distance to prove their case. But right now, since the man has resigned, we can only help but speculate over the issue. So for me, that was an example of how, you know, there are other examples of other lower profile people who, you know, sometimes people just publish, like there was this one lady whose name was associated with a certain famous businessman and pastor. And she did maintain her innocence, that she was not romantically involved on Twitter. But social media, it kind of like blurred the lines. The information was being exchanged between Twitter and the messaging platforms. the girl never had a chance to really, people may not have seen her retort or a response to the allegations that were being peddled against her. So those are instances that if you're a high profile person, it'll be very difficult to retrieve your name once it has been damaged through the instrumentality of social media. So those are just some of the examples. And yeah, sometimes they'll just put a picture, not even text, of a politician, for example, with a certain, yeah. And there's no editor to censor or to sift through that information, because everyone has got a Twitter handle, everyone has a WhatsApp account, everyone has a Facebook page, and no one is going to hold anyone to account. And so I think that's also one of the extremes and examples of what is happening with social media and new media.
Thank you, Admire. Can Wallace, you are here. Do you want to bring the discussion that you're having into the chat room as well, and share your thoughts as well? Because we have been reading very important elements, so we would like to have your views regarding the topic on social media in Africa. Wallace, you're here, and I think that you can hear us. If you can turn on your camera or mic, just microphone. Probably he cannot hear us. Anyone else that wants to take the floor? And I bring the case. We have very important elements as well. So what I would like to ask, if there are any other questions, Jimmy, where is Jimmy? Jimmy, also, do you want to take the floor? Because there has been also a very interesting discussion in the chat room, and I would like, for those of you that you didn't follow up, what we actually discussed about the role of social media has been discussed in the chat room. Jimmy?
Wallace is also, I just saw Wallace's video and Mike was also on just now.
Okay. Okay.
Hello?
Hi. Yes, hi.
Yeah, we just got home, but this is a very nice discussion. I was not going to use it for any reason. Thank you. Good to meet you, my compatriots, Admire. Nicole, I haven't met you before, but I know we are good friends elsewhere. And this is a very rich and discussion.
Sorry, Wallace, your audio is quite bad. Would you mind bringing your device closer to you so that we can hear you? We can't hear you very clearly. Thank you.
Okay. Now, am I audible?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, thank you. So I was going to say, just to buttress my point, that social media in the context of democracy is an inalienable right, in the sense that without information, freedom of expression and access to information, and as many viewpoints as possible, that was what enriches democracy. So the negatives could be there, and of course, this is a new tool that is still developing. We are trying to see some of the commercial aspects of what social media entails and the big tech giants and all that. But for citizens, I come from a country where we really treasure social media. Sometimes the authorities say that they are being thrown or they are being overwhelmed by so much freedom, and there have been attempts to actually stifle some of the voices that are coming out of the result of this freedom. But having tasted the freedom, we don't want to cede that one to authorities. What I would say is that to a democracy, this was not even foreseen, even as the social media space was developing. So to me, we just need to harness the space by probably regulating the kind of conversations that we have in terms of democracy, how we hold these people to account, the authority, how we even hold other people in power and the public space, so that we do not abuse them or we reduce the incidences of abuse and harness the power of social media, because it's inalienable. Thank you.
Thank you, Wallace. Jimmy, Yes, he's in a noisy place and he cannot actually open up. Does anyone else wants to ask, say something to both Aora and Admire?
Yeah, look,
Yes.
I was just thinking about, I think it's a recent case, I don't know whether it's Myanmar, where I think it's Facebook, which decided, or was it the military government which decided not to allow Facebook to, no, let me not use that example. Let me use the example of Russia slowing down the internet speed of Twitter. Until Twitter is censored its the kind of the information that appears on its website, and presumably the Russian government will be thinking that whatever Twitter is allowing to be seen by its citizens is not necessarily true. It's fake news. So that's another conversation. So these media organizations have got so much power now to allow certain things to obtain or to disallow, and governments are kind of like pushing back against the same kind of power that these media organizations are having. And in the meantime, we as netizens are watching this tussle between national governments and these oligopolies. And I think the concept even of nation states is going to be very interesting going forward as these social media organizations grow. Of course, in my view, they are actually in essence intelligence organizations, because there was so much data right to the T about you and me, about our way of life, about everything that we do with all those algorithms and the technology. So from that standpoint, they are states. I would want to submit that they are states in a sense. And I think we will soon have to have that discussion around what kind of a world we're going to be living in with that awesome power of the social media organizations which they are gathering, because we want to connect with each other. And in the process, we are ceding so much of our own power and agency to them. That's my submission.
Sorry, Nikos, your mic is still muted.
I'm sorry. I will I am intrigued of what Admire have said, and I will just respond and ask a question on the same time. Why Twitter and Facebook, they are oligopolies, and not CNN, Al Jazeera, etc., etc. And CNN and Al Jazeera and BBC and whatever, just name one very big multinational media group, let's say, they are also oligopolies, don't they?
I think the difference is that Facebook and Google, they transcend those barriers, because their value proposition was to socially connect us. They did not start off wanting to be oligopolies, but as their influence and importance grew, they've become what they've become, and they're competing with the traditional media houses for advertising, for subscribers, and so forth. So they now meet certain criteria for being media oligopolies.
Okay, so then I will then build on that and say, so the issue is that we have to leave behind their role as social media and deal with them as news organizations. That's my proposition and my last point. I think that this is where it lies, the difference. It used to be social media connections and taking advantage of that, let's say, connectivity, because they bring together large number of people, but now they have changed it into something different. So we need actually to adjust these rules. That was my final point. Aora and Admire as well. Aora.
Okay, yes, I feel like for not wanting to repeat too much what has already been said, I'm pretty much in agreement with how this conversation has evolved. Unfortunately, due to technology and the internet, Haruna hasn't been able to join us for this session. But also, fortunately, thanks to technology and the internet, we have a voice note that he sent through, and I'd like to just play that so that he has an opportunity to also share his thoughts. Forgive if it seems out of context of how far we've gotten into this conversation. He hasn't been part of this conversation, but I think it's important that we hear what he wanted to share. So I'm just going to share my screen quickly and play his voice note for you. Okay.
Ahora we cannot hear it. It is.
You cannot hear it? Okay, no, that's fine. Let me play.
You need to increase the volume.
Yes, the volume. Exactly.
The volume. Okay. Oh, I don't seem to be winning here. Let's see. Okay, hold on. Let me just choose an alternative medium, because I think I can't seem to increase volume from where I am through a screen share. So let me stop a share and let me just play it directly from my phone.
Hello, all of you. Hope the webinar is going on well. Unfortunately, it looks like technology has not been very friendly on my side. I have missed out exchanging views on this very important topic on which touches on the core subject of my work, but hope that I will be able to join in next time or any time from now. Very unfortunate, but I was looking forward interacting with a number of you on this subject and also sharing Uganda's experience on this matter of social media, a friend or a foe of democracy. I had prepared for this since I was contacted by Ashken. Unfortunately, it has not been possible. We have tried all our level best to ensure that I'm online, but it has not worked. I wish you all the best.
Shame. Okay, so unfortunately, I guess that was an apology. But yeah, unfortunately, Haruna won't be able. This is really and truly his space, so I think he's quite gutted and asked if we could please play this voice note for everyone. So please do accept Haruna's apology, and we will try to have him on next time, and maybe just have his presentation on standby as well, just in case he won't be able to log in, so that we can just share it with you all. But I think given the time and where we are in the discussion, I'm just checking to see if there are any other additions that we haven't already read in the chat. But Nikos, I feel like this would be a safe space. I feel like this conversation can continue online. Like, this is really to get the ball rolling, so that when we next time around, when we are chatting and speaking on social media, let's continue the conversation offline. Out of this Zoom session, I mean. So let's continue it on social media, continue it in WhatsApp groups. This was live streaming onto Facebook, I believe. So the link, if you know there's somebody who needed to be part of this conversation, please do share the link. It will be made available to you. Hopefully somebody can just quickly copy paste. Let me send you that link in the chat, and please do share it. Nikos, I don't know if you have anything to sort of close up this conversation.
Yes, two things. One, it is I would like to thank everyone for being here with us, Aura for actually moderating, organizing, and also admire, and also everyone that contributed. I just want to remind you that this is actually an event organized from this end and World Learning and supported from State Department Citizen Exchange and Educational Exchanges Office. It is an initiative, DCN Africa, it is an initiative that aims to attract people around that are working around the issues of digital communication and communication in general. So please join us. There is an excellent group, an excellent network opportunities, and we would be more than happy to have you on. I would also like to remind you that this discussion will continue. We organize every week these webinars. Please follow and be informed from our Facebook, Twitter pages, since we talk about social media, and then also from our web pages. I would, based on being inspired from admire what he have said about the world, I would just like to share with you this really nice song that from Louis Armstrong, which is called "What a Wonderful World." I think it's wonderful world with many challenges ahead. Thank you very much.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this discussion. Admire, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, as well as everyone who shared their contributions in the chat. I think this was a great discussion. In summary, is it friend or foe? If you can just answer this quick question, just a yes or no. Nikos, is social media a friend or foe? I know there's gray lines. I know we can't be on either side, but in your opinion, is it a friend or foe to democracy?
I was trying actually to propose a new combining word. So I would say that it is a froe.
A froe end. Okay, all right. And Admire, is it a friend or foe?
Yeah, well, I would like us all to leave this meeting with this concept around the social contract. We need to rethink the social contract that now needs to be between us and these social media organizations, and not just between citizens and their national governments. That's my proposal. There now needs to be a social contract between us and these social media organizations, because they have a lot of power, more power than people realize, and it's benign. That's my area of interest right now.
I feel another webinar topic coming up. Please, if you have any webinar topic suggestions, please in the chat group, there is an option. I'm the queen of plugging. There is an option. Please fill out our survey and suggest any discussions you feel that we should tackle. Admire, I better see your option there in that survey. I better see your suggestion there. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Again, follow us on all our social media networks, DigiComNet, as well as DCN Africa on all social media platforms. And have a great evening. Nikos, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
All right.